start the recording here. So big week this week. We are finishing up Unit 1, which means next week is the exam week. We're going to talk more about that at the end of today. So this week we have sections 7, 8, and 9. 2 Excel assignments this week, inserting pie charts and then a descriptive statistics assignment. Neither one of them should take all that long. I do have 2 help videos that go with those. I will be posting those in the announcements. So after class today, I will be posting 3 announcements. One of them will have the Excel videos. So when you get to those assignments, if you want help, you can watch those Excel help videos. One of them will be about Project 1. And then the 3rd announcement will be this live session. So make sure you pay attention. If you need help with those Excel assignments, you check out the announcements. You have 2 quizzes this week, 1 discussion board, and then we get into Project 1. Project 1 coordinates with Section 9 in our packet. It's not too bad. I have 2 videos that go with Project 1. One of them is like an introductory video. It's 3 minutes long, and it just talks through what it is, what it's about, what to expect, that kind of thing. And then the other video is a how to get started with the Excel portion. So in case you look at it and go, I have no idea where to start, that video will help you get started. So again, those 2 videos are very short, but I will be posting those in the announcements. And that first project is due at the end of March, a month from tomorrow, actually. And with that being said, the project has 2 parts, an Excel piece and a written piece, like, Word. And if you want me to check your Excel portion first, all you have to do is send that to me in an email, and I will check it for you before you turn it in. Again, remember that the first exam is next week. You have to make an appointment. Hopefully you've already done that. If not, there is a video in the announcements of how to schedule your exam in Ivy Learn. If you have questions on any of that, again, please shoot me an email as soon as possible, because next week is not the time to schedule your exam. It should be done before next week gets here. Okay, let's go ahead and move into Section 7. As long as none of you have any questions, we will go ahead and get started. All right, as usual, if you do have questions, feel free to interrupt me either verbally or through the chat box. So Section 7 is working with percentages. Now, we're going to talk about these problems in 2 different ways. And I'm really only going to ask you to do maybe 2 problems both ways. And then whichever way you feel more comfortable, that's how I want you to move forward. So every one of these problems can be done in one of 2 ways. One is not better than the other. It really depends on how your brain works. So you have to decide what works best for you. So with proportions, this is kind of your just overarching introduction to how to work with percentages in writing proportions. So remember last week we solved a lot of problems with proportions, and by now you're probably a professional. So with proportions and percents, half of your proportion is always going to be the percent. And if you had to think about writing a percent as a fraction, what do you think we would put that percent over? Anybody want to take a guess? 100, exactly. Because percent is out of 100. So when you're writing proportions, half of the proportion is always the percent, 20%, whatever that percent is, it's that number over 100. And then the other half of the proportion we think of as part over whole. And depending on what verbiage you might see, is over of is another way to kind of think of the part to whole. So and you're going to see this in the next slide, that when you see a number that follows the word is, that's part of it. The of represents the whole. And again, that will make sense here in just a minute. But there's kind of your basic idea of setup with proportions. With equations, you have to take a English sentence and turning it into a math sentence. So the things to remember with equations is that is means equals, of means to multiply, and if we have a percent, we have to change that to a decimal. So the big difference between the equations and the proportions is that we never have to change percent to a decimal and vice versa when we're dealing with proportions. The fraction automatically takes care of that for us, whereas in the equation, we actually do have to do that math. Okay, so we're going to do the first couple problems both ways, both as a proportion and as an equation. And I want you to write them down as you're working through these both ways and kind of see which way really appeals to you. Because there's not, right, they're both mathematically fabulous. It's just a matter of what do you like and what do you feel comfortable with. And that's what I want you to use. So, okay, let's do this first one. So 16% of what number is 40? So the first one we're going to do is the proportion. Now, when I'm setting up a proportion, I always start with the percent, because to me, that's the easy part. So if I see 16%, what is my first ratio going to look like? Right, we said percent always goes over the 100, right? So 16% is going to give me 16 over 100. Exactly, Trevor, exactly. So that percent over 100, so instead of writing it as a percent, now we're writing it as a fraction. So we're still, I guess, manipulating the math a little bit. Now on the other side, remember we want part over whole, or we're thinking is over of. Well, you see is 40 of what number? So what's going to go on top? What's going to go in my numerator? $40. Is the 40. Of would give me X in the denominator. Now we don't have to, Amber, we don't have to change that percent to a decimal because we wrote it as a fraction. So we've already manipulated it. Okay, so we have successfully set up our proportion. The percent of 16 goes over 100. Is, the number 40 follows is, that goes on top, and then we have X. Recall back from last week, we cross multiply and divide. I end up with 16x equals 4,000. Can anybody give me a value for x? 250, thank you. Okay, so that's one way to do this problem. Now the other way, we are going to go ahead and set up now. And when I'm changing this English sentence into a mathematical sentence, I usually just go left to right because that's exactly how we read. So I start with 16%. This is where we take percent and we change it to a decimal, 0.16. Then it says of. What does of mean? To multiply. Good. So we're going to take 0.16 and we're going to multiply by what number, which is my x. Is means equals, and then lastly we have 40. So we have now written that as a sentence. Now we want to get x by itself, so we divide both sides by that decimal, 0.16, and we end up with x equals 250. So you get the same answer either way. I often find that a lot of students will do kind of a combination of equations and proportions depending on the problem. And it really, some story problems I think are easier to do with proportions, and some problems like this are easier to do with equations. So it really is however you prefer to do the problems. All right, let's go ahead and do another one. I would like you guys to try to do this one, and you can either try it both ways, try it one way. We're going to do it both ways together on the board, but I'm going to give you just a minute to try it one way or the other. Pick one and see what you can come up with. And just give me a yes in the chat box when you have it completed. Okay, we've got a few here, so let's go ahead and set these up. All right, so somebody who used a proportion. Give me one of the ratios in your proportion. $240 over 600. Good. Because is 240 of 600 is over of. What does the other one look like? The other ratio. The other one is always about the percent. Percent is always over 100. Yep, and if we don't know what it is, it's got to be an x. So there's x over 100. Okay, good. Did anybody set this up as an equation? What does this look like as an equation? $600x equals 240. Good. Because we have what percent, which is the x, times 600, and multiplication is commutative, so it doesn't matter what order we put them in. Good. Either way, so proportion or equation, what do you get for an answer? What is x? Stacy, almost. Amber, almost. You guys did the equation. So you multiplied by 600 and you got x is 0.4. But that doesn't answer the question. 0.4 is a number, right? There you go, Brianna. So 40% is the answer. Because remember, the question says what percent. So when you use the equation in this case, you get a decimal as an answer. You have to change that back to a percent. You've got to go back and say, what does the problem ask for? Now, if you used the proportion and you cross multiply and divide, you end up with an answer of 40. And then you just have to chuck on the percent sign at the end. So that is something to very much keep in mind, that you always have to go back and recheck what the question is asking. Is it asking you for a number or is it asking you for a percent? Because those are different and it does matter. So, okay, let's do one more. I'm gonna have you guys try this one too. Okay, let's see how we did with the proportion. Did anybody set up a proportion? And if you did, can you throw in your ratios into the chat box? Or we didn't. Okay, there we go. So percent is 30, good, so 30 over 100, exactly. And then is over of, so x over 80. Excellent. Okay, did anybody write an equation and can give me that? Excellent. So percent goes to a decimal, times that by 80 is what number? X. Good. Either way, what do you get for a value of x? 24. Boom. Very good. All right, you guys seem to pick that up pretty good. Did anybody have any questions over those very straightforward percent number problems? All right, there's no extra wordage, no trickery. Those just are what they are. Great. Okay, then let's skip the next one and let's go to story problems. So again, you can set these up either way, proportion or an equation. Let's go ahead and do this one together. Sarah's paycheck was $1,750 and she pays $800 in rent. What percent of her paycheck goes to rent? Now, for setting this up as a proportion, I always, me personally, I start with the percent. Look how straight of a line that is. What percent? Well, if I don't know the percent, that's automatically x over 100. And now when I'm thinking about my other ratio, right, I want to think part to whole. So when I'm looking at these other numbers, her paycheck was $1,750. She pays $800 in rent. Which one of those represents a part and which one represents a whole? Right? So basically my question is, what goes on top? $1,750 or $800? 800, exactly. Because we're talking about her paycheck. Well, her whole paycheck is $1,750. Part of her paycheck is $800, right? So that's the proportion part. Now, when you're thinking about an equation, look at the last line. What percent, that's X, of her paycheck? Well, of means to multiply by her paycheck, and her paycheck is $1,750. Goes to is kind of the same as equals rent, and rent is $800. So when we're dealing with true story problems, sometimes you have to decipher and break things down a little bit differently, which can be difficult depending on the story problem. But again, it's however your brain sees it. So when we look at this, let's go ahead and round to the nearest percent. What percent of her paycheck does go to rent? And we've got good answers there. To the nearest percent would be 46%, which is just depressing, but totally a true statement. All right. So again, every one of these problems that we do can be done either way, equations or proportions. All right, so from here on out, and all of your homework, exams, you can do it however you want. So I want you to do number 9 and give me a yes in the chat box after you got it. Okay, I got quite a few yeses in there. So first of all, just tell me what your answer is, and then we'll work backwards on that. What do we get for an answer in this one? 133 is correct. So 36% means 36 over 100. Think math is the best subject. Of course it is. If 48 students think this, how many total students? Well, we're trying to find the total. Total goes on the bottom, so 48 on the top. If you're looking as an equation, 36% of all students think math is great, and that would be your equation setup. So good. Any questions over section 7 and percent problems? Gone once, gone twice. Usually with these, the more you do, the easier they get. You get comfortable with them, and then you start flying. So it's just a matter of getting to that comfortable spot. But good, okay. So that's the end of that PowerPoint. And then we bring up this one. It's so fabulous. Okay, section 8, we get into descriptive statistics. So again, remember, there is an Excel assignment with descriptive statistics, and you do need to use formulas. I need to write that better in the directions. But in the Excel assignment for descriptive statistics, you are expected to use Excel formulas. Just FYI. Okay, great. So today here, we are going to do all of this by hand, and then when it comes to web work, you will do some by hand, I believe, and you will do some in Excel. And then for the Excel assignment, of course, you're doing it all in Excel. So let's just run through a few descriptive statistics, maybe kind of quickly here. When we talk about the mean, what is the mean? Can anybody describe it to me? Trevor is absolutely correct. Another name for the mean is the average. How do we find that? And this is stuff that you have definitely all heard of before at some point in your life. It just might have been a really long time ago. So we've got to knock off those cobwebs and bring it all to the forefront of your mind. Stacy, you're absolutely correct. We're going to add them all together and then divide by how many there are. So we're going to take the sum of all the numbers, because sum means to add, and we're going to divide by the total number of numbers, the total number. Okay, and we're going to do examples of all of this, so we're going to just kind of talk through them first. All right, so the mean, we add them all together, divide by how many there are. What about the median? Can anybody describe that to me? And you can use your microphone if that's easier. Trisha's correct. It is the middle number. So the median is the middle. And who said that? Amber kind of made a good point there. Halfway between the largest and the smallest. So the key there is that your numbers have to be in order, least to greatest. Right? And sometimes the numbers will be nice and they're already in order least to greatest for you, and sometimes they're not. So you do have to pay attention, right? The details do matter. Okay, good. What about the mode? What is the mode? Occurs the most. Exactly. So middle, median, they both have D's. Mode, most, they both have O's. If you put your numbers in order to find the median, it's very easy to see if you have a mode, right? Okay, good. What about the range? What is the range? The range is not a ratio. Nope. It's actually simpler than that. Stacy, you're kind of correct. The first to last numbers, yeah, it's the distance between, or the difference between the biggest and smallest number. So who said that one? You guys are typing so fast. Trisha. Yes. So we're going to take the biggest number and we're going to subtract the smallest number. So the difference between those two is the range, right? How far apart are the min and the max of our data set? Okay, and then the last one is the percentile. And this one is actually one that you may or may not have talked about at some point in your life. If you have kids, you're probably familiar with percentile, because when you take your kids into the doctor, you know, they measure their height, their weight, their head size. And they talk about, you know, little Johnny's in the 40th percentile in height and the 80th percentile in weight and that kind of crap. So if you're a parent, you've probably heard of this, but outside of that, I don't know, SAT scores, ACT scores, they talk about percentiles, a lot of standardized scores. But other than that, not really. So percentile, as you can imagine, does deal with 100. And so the basic, oh, you had a preemie. My niece and nephew were both preemies. Yeah, my niece was 212 when she was born. Man, they're just so tiny at that point. But you know, she's 15 now. Is your preemie good? Everything's okay with that? Sorry, we're a little off topic now, but I don't want any babies, but dang, they're cute. I like other people's babies. I just don't want one. Yeah. Small but great. Good. Glad to hear that. My 15-year-old niece is now taller than me, right? And she was 212 when she was born. So, okay. Anyway, back to math. So when you talk about percentile being out of 100, so if we're talking about, let's just go back to kids and say little Johnny's in the 40th percentile for weight. That would mean that little Johnny, if we're talking about weight, is heavier than 40% of kids in his age group, males in his age group, because it's by gender and age. You know, so if let's say you take the SATs, you were in high school and you scored in the 95th percentile, that means your test score was higher than 95% of the people who took it on the day that you did. That kind of thing. So whatever your percentile is, you're higher than everybody else. Whatever. So great. Now with percentiles, if you think about this, man, that's another pretty straight line. I'm so impressed with myself today. If we have 100 numbers in a data set, percentiles would be easy. Because if you have 100 numbers and you wanted the 10th percentile, it would be the 10th number. And if you wanted the 20th percentile, you'd have the 20th number. But oftentimes we do not deal with 100 numbers in a data set. So we will be talking about how can we find, we are only going to find the 50th percentile, the 25th percentile, and the 75th. These are the ones we will find by hand. Anything outside of these, Excel will do for you, because Excel is fabulous. All right. Okay, and we're going to talk about how to do that in an actual example, because I don't know about you guys, but abstract math is very hard for me to comprehend. I like numbers. I like to see an example. I like to see it live action in front of me. Then it makes sense. You know, I took a class in college. It was all theory of math. And I'm like, how does that make sense to anybody, right? Okay, so let's get to an actual example where we can see all of this in practice. So I'm going to ask you, because I believe in you, I would like you to try to A through D, the mean, median, mode, and range. I'm going to ask you guys to find those 4 and then stop, because we are going to talk about the 25th and the 75th percentile together. But I want you guys to try to knock out A through D, just from what we talked about and kind of bringing back everything that you talked about in your past mathematical life. So if you get stuck, that's okay. If you get stuck, tell me where you got stuck, A, B, C, or D. And otherwise, I'm going to give you a minute or 2. All right, we've got quite a few yeses. If you're not quite there yet, that's okay. Just I don't want to waste too much time. So let's go to the mean. Okay, so hopefully you wrote all this down. But when you okay, let me back up. When you take the exam next week, you are going to be given scrap paper, and you can write as much or as little on that scrap paper. Then the way this works is you're going to finish your exam, and you're going to hit submit, and it's going to give you a score, and you're going to go, what? I know I did better than that, and it's okay. Some of them don't grade correctly. Some of them I have to grade. I think there's like 20 points that I have to grade anyway. So the highest you could get is an 80, and that's if it graded correctly, and it never does. So I go back in and I grade. Yes, you can use a calculator, and that's pretty much it. But I go back in and I grade your entire exam, and I use the scrap paper that you turn into the testing center when you finish. Now, if your scrap paper looks like somebody just took their pen and threw up all over a piece of paper, I don't really look at it. I'm going to be honest, because I'm not going to fight to find your work. So if you have it numbered, number 1 and there's work, and number 2 and there's work, and number 3 and there's work, then if you miss a problem, I can find it. If you knew what you were doing, maybe you mistyped in a number or you didn't round correctly, I can give you partial credit. IB Learn is going to give you all or nothing for the most part. I go back in and I award partial credit where it's deserved. So it's very important that you give me work on problems that actually need work. Okay, so when we're talking about the mean, you might say, well, this is easy. I type it into my calculator and it spits out an answer. And while that's correct, I can't grade your calculator. So in the off chance that you round incorrectly, you type in a wrong number, by giving me this initial fraction, right? When you add all of these numbers up, your calculator probably spit out 164. And then you notice that there are 7 numbers. So just by writing down that fraction, it shows me you had the right idea. So maybe you typed in the wrong thing when you went to divide, or you rounded incorrectly. Or if I see that your top number is 152, I can say, oh, you forgot the 12, and that'll throw off everything, right? So I can see what you did. My point being, don't be afraid to write things down as you're taking this exam next week, because it can be very beneficial for you to do that. Okay, so when you divide that, did you get roughly 23.4? Right, I'm just kind of talking now. Stop me if you have questions. Okay, so there's the mean, right? We add them all up, we divide by 7, we get roughly, I rounded, 23.4. Now when we go to find the median, right, they're already in order for you, least to greatest. You're welcome. And when we go to find the number in the middle, well, there's an odd number, right? There's 7 numbers. So 24 is the number in the middle. And I'm a little bit excessive there, but the median is 24. It's exactly one number in the middle. I cut through it. There it is. We're going to come back to that in a minute. The mode is the number that appears most often. As you probably noticed, 32 appears twice. It is possible for you to have 2 modes. We call those things being bimodal, because bi means 2. Anything more than that, and you really don't have a mode. You have to insert something weird in WebWork for that, so just be aware. And then to find the range is the biggest number, 32, minus the smallest number, 12, which gives me 20. So my range in this case is 20. Any questions A through D? Okay, now I want to go to the percentiles. Okay, I've already overemphasized the median. And we know from our talk on the previous page that the median is the middle number. And if you think from 0 to 100 in terms of percentiles, right, because we're talking percentiles now, what would be the percentile in the middle? If the smallest is 0 and the largest is 100, what's the percentile in the middle? 50, exactly. So the 50th percentile is also the median. So think about that. The median is the number in the middle. So when I talk percentiles, 50th percentile is the median, and we know that that has a value of 24. Now, when you're thinking about the other ones, so in this case, the 25th percentile, well, 25th percentile is the first fourth, right? The first quarter of data. If I take this number here, that cuts it in half, which means from here, pink to pink is now 0 to 50. Well, what is 25 in relation to 0 to 50? Does that question make sense? If my focus is now only from 0 to 50, half, thank you, so it did make sense. 25 is right in the middle, right? It's half of between 0 and 50, meaning this front data, right, everything in front of the median, if we find the median of that piece, I will have the 25th percentile, because the middle, by definition, is median, and the middle of 0 to 50 is 25. So in this case, if I just look at these three numbers, this is the middle number, so that would be the 25th percentile. It would be 16, because it's halfway between 0 and 50. Now that is the same idea if I change this now to blue and go from here to here. Now I'm talking from 50 to 100. Well, halfway between 50 and 100 is 75. So everything to the right of the median, if I find the median of that, right, halfway between, that is the 75th percentile. So the 75th percentile is 32. So when you look at this, right, so I have my overemphasized vertical lines. Between my vertical lines, there's one number between my first, one number, and one number. And that should always be true. The 25th, the 50th, the 75th percentile will break your data up into 4 equal parts. And so when you look at the data points that are left after you have these vertical lines, you should have the same number of data points in each section. Okay, it's a very colorful page right there. And this is the one thing that people tend to it takes a little bit longer because it's probably not something that you've done. So in this next example, we're not going to do the mean, the mode, and the range. We're just going to do the median, the 25th, and the 75th percentile. So again, they're in order least to greatest. You're welcome. What is the median of this data set? It is not 58. It is 59. Okay, so let's look at why that's true. You now have an equal number, right? So when we have an equal number, we look at the 2 in the middle, and we take the average of the 2 in the middle. So if you were actually doing the mathematics of it, you would say that's 118 over 2, which is 59. So the median actually falls right in the middle. Right? So this is our 50th percentile and our median. And think about it, when you draw that vertical line, you should have the same number of data points on each side. There should be 3 in front of it and 3 behind it, because the median splits it exactly in half. And in this case, it does. But notice my vertical line does not cut through a number. It cuts between numbers. And that's why in this front half, 58 has to be played within the front half, and 60 is played within the last half. Because they were, I think of them as trees. You know, in the past, on the previous example, we chopped down the 24 tree, so it did not get played with again. In this example, I didn't cut down either tree, the 58 or the 60. So, because I didn't chop them down, they lived to see another day. So then we go to find the 25th. Okay, well, 25th, we focus on the front. What is the median of this pink half? 50. And that one actually does get chopped down. Then we go to the upper half. We'll call that the blue half. What's the median of the upper half? 60. So the 75th percentile would be 60. And then again, and feel free to do your vertical lines, in front of the vertical, there's 1, 1, 1, 1. I always double check to make sure that I have the same number of data points in each chunk. Okay. Does that make sense? Any questions on percentiles? Okay, the only thing I want to add at this point is Excel. When you use Excel, and if you watch my video, there are it'll talk about the formulas. But when you go under the formulas in Excel, there are 2 different percentiles, and one of them is percentile INC, and one is EXC. Okay, the one that you want to use is INC. Oh, that highlighter did not work the way I wanted it to. You want to use INC because INC means included, and it includes 0 and 100. Well, you want to include 0 and 100. That really gives you the full span of possible percentiles, because 100% is everything and 0% is none. I don't know why you would exclude those. And EXC means to exclude. So when you're doing your Excel assignment, you want to use the percentile INC. Just FYI. Let's throw out some more letters. Okay. Enough of that. Let's go to symmetrical and skewness. Just real quick, because I'm over my time here in section 8. Symmetrical is when the left and the right side are equal, and that means that the mean is generally equal to the median. And we're going to get more into that in sections 14 and 15 in Unit 2 when we have symmetrical data. Now, if you have data that is skewed right, that means the tail goes to the right. So you might have a huge bump up here, and then it goes this way. So this might be age of people at Chuck E. Cheese, right? There's a shit ton of kids, and then just a few adults that are the suckers that have to be there. So because this is skewed right, the tail goes to the right. That means that the mean is greater than the median, generally. Okay, and I always, when you use these symbols, right, this is the greater than symbol, look at the way the tail's pointing to the right, so that means the mean is greater than the median. And then the last one, skewed left, well, if we have a huge bump over here and it tails to the left, see how this is pointing to the left? The tail goes to the left. So that means the mean is less than the median. This might be an example of the age of people who do the New York Times crossword. It's a bunch of old people and then a few, genius kids. I do not do the New York Times crossword, and I consider myself to be a smart person, but no. Okay, so that's just very, very quick skew. You might want to watch the video over skewness that goes with your packet. It might be helpful, especially if this is kind of a new concept to you. It's not a large concept in this course. Usually there is one test question about, is this skewed left or right or symmetrical? So you kind of want to know the difference between them. But other than that, there's really no true application in this course for skewness. It's more of just, can you recognize skewed left, skewed right data, that kind of thing. All right, that's section 8. Flew right through the end of that. And now we're into section 9. Section 9 is what your first project is over. We're actually going to do an example by hand that is very familiar. That's not the word I'm looking at. Similar. That's what I want. That is very similar to what your project is going to look like. So we are going to get into weighted averages in section 9. Now, in section 8, we talked about a basic average. When you do the basic average, where you add up everything in front of you and you divide by how many there are, that assumes that everything in that category is weighted equally. If they're all weighted the same, then when you divide by how many there are, it's fine. It works. But think about how this course that you are in right now is being graded, right? You have homework, you have discussion boards, you have exams, you have quizzes, you have projects, and they all have different weights, right? If you don't do an Excel assignment and you get a 0, that hurts you way less than if you skip the exam next week. I mean, completely not even in the same category of conversation of how much it will hurt your grade if you don't do it. So when things have different percent values or point values, we call it a weighted average because it's different. And we have 2 types of these. So we have the percentages, like calculating your grade in a course. And those are easy to find because anything with a percent is percentages. And then we have counts as the other method, and your GPA is a weighted average with counts. And then if they talk about averages and they have different values, things with numbers, we talk about those. So, okay, again, let's jump in to an actual example. So this example here is going to be very similar to what your project is going to look like, except you're going to organize it in Excel and use all formulas in Excel because, you know, why wouldn't you? Okay, so I don't know about you guys, but I am a very a visual person, and when I do math, I like to have it organized in a, I don't know, a visual appealing way because that helps me stay focused. So when I'm looking at this, I notice that I have 4 categories. So I'm going to go ahead and create my table, and my first column is just going to be the category. So I have homework, I have quizzes, I have projects, and I have exams. My 4 categories. And the reason I set these up like this is because pretty much every weighted average problem, whether it's percents or counts, can be set up the same way. And I like to kind of stay consistent in my laziness. So my next one is going to be the weights. Now I know that this is a percentage problem because look at all my weights. They're all given as percents. Okay, you're good. Okay, so my weights, I'm just going to rewrite them down here. So I have 10%, I have 20%, I have 25 and 45. Now, it is important that those percentages add up to 100%. I actually had a student yesterday, not in a class of mine, in a different math class on a different campus, and I was looking at her syllabus. The weights in that class did not add up to 100. They added up to 101. And I was like, that's weird. That's not accurate. You should ask about that because that's wrong. But anyway, they should add up to 100%. Great. The next one is what we're going to call the category. I can't spell category average. Okay, category average. And this is because when you look up here for homework, overall homework is 10% of your grade, and you have 4 homework assignments. Now, it's not that each one of these 4 assignments is 10%, it's that overall homework is 10% of your grade. So how would I find the category average of those 4 assignments? You're working just in the homework. Those 4. Now, think back to section 8. All of your homework assignments are weighted equally, right? Nothing in the homework is more special than anything else, right? So exactly, Trevor, we're going to add those 4 together and then divide by 4. So when I add those 4 up, what do we get? $382. So if I take 382 and I divide by 4, we should get a category average of 95.5. Okay, thinking back to that. And you do the same thing with the quizzes. So I have 3 quizzes. I add those up. I divide by 3. For projects, I would add those up and divide by 2. And for exams, I would divide by 2. Okay, pardon my sloppy handwriting there. But my category averages are 95.5, 78.33, 94, and 90. Did everybody get those? Any questions on the category averages? Okay. The next spot I have is quality points. And the quality points, this is a Becky-ism, quality points. It's the points that you earned in each category. So think about this. If I have a category average of 95.5 and 10% of my grade comes from that, keyword there is 10% of, right? Of means to multiply. So my next step is to multiply the weight times the category average. So if I take 10% times 95.5, right? So that would be 0.1 times 95.5. I get a quality point total of 9.55. And I do that just going down. So for quizzes, 20% times 78.33 gives me 15.67. 25% of the next one gives me 23.5. And then I get 40.5. Now, for every weighted average problem, you're always going to take your total quality points and divide it by a total of something else. So in this case, well, anytime you're dealing with percents, you would divide by the total percent. And that makes the math in this problem very easy, because the total percent, well, we already know that's 100%. And 100% as a decimal is just 1. So I'm going to have something over 1. So total quality points. If I add up these pink quality points, what do I get? $89.22. So when you're thinking about your total quality points is 89.22 divided by 1. That means the overall grade in this class is an 89.22, which is a B. And that's how that works. Okay, so that's kind of a long drawn out doing it all by hand. If you type that into Excel and you have formulas, Excel will autofill your columns. You only have to type in the formula once. Excel is a lot of helpfulness when you're dealing with this. Okay, so that's an example of a percent problem. And now we're going to do an example of accounts in the terms of a GPA, and then we'll take questions, talk about the exam, and call it a day. Okay, so now we're going to find the GPA. Pardon my table that did not work out nicely. So when you have a GPA, or you're finding your GPA, you get points based off your letter grade. So an A is 4 points, a B is 3, a C is 2, a D is 1, and if you fail the course, you earn 0 points, and that should make sense. So these credits should all be in the next column over, okay? So the first thing that you have to do, right, is you have to figure out how many points you earned. So you look at your grades. Let me change color for effect. You look at these grades that you earned, and you say, okay, how many points did I earn for each of those? So remember, a C is worth 2 points. So for biology, I got 2 points. Math, of course, you got an A in math. English, I got a B. History, I got to D. And in sociology, I got a B. So these are the points earned. But here's the thing about the points. The points are per credit hour. That's why if you fail a 4 credit hour course, it hurts your GPA a whole lot more than if you would fail a 1 credit hour course like the IBYT Success class. You always want to, the higher the credit value, the better you want to do in the class, because it has the biggest impact on your GPA. Okay, so just like in the last example, we're going to have a column called quality points. And our quality points are found by taking the credits times the point, because remember, this is per credit hour. So for biology, if I had a 3 credit hour class and I earned 2 points per credit hour, that means I earned 6 total points for biology. In math, It was 3 credit hours and I got an A, so I earned 4 points. So for math, I earned 12 quality points. For English, it's 3 times 3, which gives me 9. History, I got a D, so I only got 1 point for that, which is a total of 4. And then sociology is another 3 times 3, which is 9. So again, just like with the last example, we're going to take total quality points, but this time we're not going to divide by the total percents because we don't have any percents. So if you think about my, here's quality points. The points lead to quality points because those are essentially the same thing, right? So you, in this case, want to divide by the total credits because your GPA is calculated on how many total credits you take. If you earned 30 points, but it took you 15 credits to get there, that's different than if you earned 30 points and you only needed 10 credits to get there. Very different. So in this example, how many total quality points did we earn? $40 is correct. So my numerator when finding my GPA is 40, and then it's divided by the total credits. So I go to my credit column, which is kind of janked up. Oh, there's a heart. How many total credits did this person take? 16. So you earned 40 points, but it took you 16 credits to get there. So that's a GPA of approximately 2.5. So remember that your GPA should be somewhere between 0 and 4, right? If you get all Fs, you have a 0. If you get all As, you have a 4. So generally, it's somewhere in between there. Okay. All right, so that's just 2 examples from section 9. I do recommend, obviously, you watch the videos that go with the packet. It'll be very helpful as you work through them. Again, the more you do, the easier they get. But that's the gist of those 2. So looking forward to next week with the exam, the live session next week on Tuesday is student-driven questions to prepare for the exam. So I will not have a PowerPoint prepared. I will just have a blank PowerPoint on the screen, and it's for you to have questions. So if you don't have any questions, then you don't have to come and sit for an hour. But we can go over any and all questions that you have in the practice exam or anything else. So yeah, that's that. You can take the exam at any point in time next week. No, Trevor, it doesn't have to be done by Monday of next week. So so this, let me see, can I bring up a calendar? Okay, so you guys can see, yeah, you can see my calendar. So this week is sections 7, 8, and 9, and that stuff is all due March 5th, right, which is next Monday. You then have, let me go to March. So March 5th is when stuff from this week is due. Your exam is due by Saturday the 10th at noon. But depending on where you're taking it, not all testing centers are open on Saturday. So my recommendation would be to take it sometime between Monday and Friday, whenever you want. You have to schedule your exam. So as long as it's done by the 10th, you're good. If you're finding that we have a lot going on in these weeks, next week, which is also the week before spring break. Oh my gosh, we have more to talk about than I thought. So next week, you're going to take your exam, and then the week of the 12th is spring break. So we don't have class that week. So you can work ahead. You have all of the videos. You have everything you need. So you can work ahead from everything we're going to talk about in the week of the 19th if you want. If you feel like you're okay to work ahead, go for it. And if you have questions, of course, you can email me. That's not a problem. But yeah, so next Tuesday the 6th, I will be available. I'll be in my office. I'll have my computer up. I'll have a session up. So if you have any random questions, you can come in. You can stay as long or as short as you want. But I'm there for you. Now, one thing I don't know, I got to get in the right class. I don't know if you guys have noticed this or not, but it's something that we need to bring up is the uh, words. I'm lacking words today. And that would be the review quiz. So in Module 4, you see the Review Exam 1 quiz. And when you click on this, it's going to take you, right, you have this link here. It's going to take you outside, and this should say this, right? You see you're in a different course now. And if you didn't already, you're going to want to accept the invitation to that other course. Now, you see that this is a 100-point quiz. It's 20 questions, 75 minutes. This is going to look very much like the actual exam, and you get a grade for this. This is a quiz grade in the course. You can do this as many times as you want. After 75 minutes, it kicks you out. So you have to, I mean, if it takes you longer than that, you got to come back in anyway. But the more you do this, the more comfortable you're probably going to be on test day. So just kind of be aware of that. Don't forget to do this. That's a big 0, if you forget, and it's not a score that's going to be dropped. So it's very important that you do this test 1 review quiz, and you can do it as many times as you want. I'll try to email you to remind you to do that. But yes, don't forget to do that as well. Any other questions? Is it on the agenda? Trevor, I don't know that it is. It should show up on your calendar because I did put a due date in it for our course, just so that it would show up on your calendar. This is a statewide thing that we're trying, and because I am the statewide lead for this course, that's why it's on there. So let me go to March and see if it's showing up. Let's see where yeah. So you can see it's on the 10th. It's showing up as Review Exam 1 quiz as due the 10th because that's the day that the exam is due. So you're going to want to get it done, and you can get to it straight from there too. So get off of there. So you can click on that, and there's the link, and it'll take you again directly to it. So yeah, I would recommend doing it more than once, right? Because this is your first go round at an online exam in this course. Some of these questions were actually taken straight from the exam, different numbers but the same concepts. So you might find that to be very beneficial. And again, if you have questions, grading, things aren't right, whatever, just shoot me an email, and I'll try to get back to you as quickly as I can. So, all right, any other questions? Remember, I am going to be posting 3 announcements this afternoon. 1 that has a video to this live session, 1 about the project that is due a month from tomorrow, and the other one is the Excel help videos for the 2 Excel assignments due this week. A lot going on this week, very crazy. But big break in sight with the exam next week and then spring break. So keep up the good work. Who else has questions for me before we call it a day? Because we are now a minute over time. So I'll stick around for a few minutes if you have questions. Otherwise, let's call it a day. I'll post videos, watch those, get with me if you have any questions, and we'll go from there. So thank you for your attention and participation, and I'll chat with you guys soon. Thanks.